I've seen several of you on and off today, several times. This is Doug Starr. He is the Math Emporium coordinator here at the what campus?
Leesburg.
Leesburg. We're having one of those kind of days.
I think everybody is.
Leesburg campus. And Doug has a very strong background in geology, and he's been out digging up rocks. Did you see the rocks? Suzanne loves rocks. So I told him I only love rocks if they're diamonds. So Doug is going to do a presentation for us about volcanoes in the United States and active volcanoes. And take it away.
Well, thank you all for coming. I see I got a few people, more than I expected. But for those of you who don't know me, I run the Math Emporium here at Leesburg, and everyone's probably going, why is the Math Emporium guy over here? Well, I do have a bachelor's degree in geology with, specifically I studied mostly geohazards, earthquakes, volcanoes, and geophysics. But volcanoes has been one of my passions since I was a kid, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. The main thing is, what is a volcano? A volcano is basically anywhere in the earth that magma reaches the surface. And what's magma? Magma is just liquid rock under the ground. When it hits the surface, it switches to lava. Two different names for the same exact thing. Just if it hits the ground, you switch the name. We have volcanoes all over the earth, mainly around the Ring of Fire, which I'll get to. But you have three main kinds of volcanoes. You have a shield volcano, which is what you would find in Hawaii. Mons Olympus on Mars is the largest one in the solar system that we know of. Basically, it's just where magmas come out, float out, and it just accumulates. So they tend to be very long and very short. Again, you have Olympus Mons. It doesn't look that big on here. That's actually on Mars. That is the size of Alaska. It is the largest volcano that we know of. And then you have the Kilauea in Hawaii, which is probably the most famous that we can think of. Basically, Kilauea has been spitting lava like this for almost 30 years, over 30 years. You have cinder cones, which are just basically ash spit out from the earth. So they tend to be very short. They're very, very fine grained. One of the things our professors loved to do to us on these trips was we'd go out to a cinder cone, they'd be like, okay, first one up to the top gets an A. And you would step up and you'd come down about 3/4 of what you stepped up. So it could take you a good hour to climb a very short one of these. And they'd just sit and laugh and laugh and laugh as all of us idiots tried to get to the top of this thing.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Around the trees at the bottom, is that snow or is that cinder?
That's going to be snow. This cinder cone's been inactive for many, many years. Stratovolcanoes, this is what you would typically think of as a volcano. They're also called composite volcanoes. This is Mount Fuji in Japan, probably the most famous stratovolcano that you around, or the most pictured anyhow. Basically, this is just layers of ash covered with layers of magma. And the reason that's important is it creates this hard surface. So what happens is these get clogged. This vent will get clogged up, and the magma will come out, and eventually it'll explode because it has nowhere to go. It's like unpopping a champagne cork. So these are the ones that are really destructive. So your Mount Vesuvius, Mount St. Helens, Krakatoa, these really big ones, these are all stratovolcanoes. And what causes them? You have the Ring of Fire. Does anyone know about plate tectonics? Is everyone familiar? You're familiar? So basically, anywhere the plates are subducted, you'll have these. You get up a lot in Japan, Indonesia, South America, Chile. They have a lot on the western coast of the U.S. Basically what happens is the lithosphere comes down and it subducts under the lithosphere of the next plate coming over. The rock starts to melt and it needs somewhere to go. it can either go down into the mantle or it can come up, forming this volcanic arc along the coast. Typically, you see these where you have continental meeting ocean. We also have hot spots. This would be how Hawaii is formed. This would be how Yellowstone. It's basically just a big chamber of magma under the ground that comes up. So you end up with this weird island arc like you have in Hawaii. The reason being, this magma does not move, but the plate on top of it is moving. So as the plate is moving, the magma will create an island, the plate will continue moving. So eventually this conduit will break off, it'll find a new path and go to the next shortest. So it'll make a new island. That's why you have a chain of islands like Hawaii or Japan. This is why the one on Mars is so large. The plates there don't move. So it's just been magma spitting out for thousands, billions of years in one spot. So it can get that big. We don't have them that big in America or on the planet Earth because our plates do move. So some notable volcanic eruptions. This is worldwide first. Toba. Probably never heard of it. It looks like a nice little peaceful town. It erupted, I think this one's 28 million years ago. Or not even that, I'm sorry, 1700 BCE. This was one of the most destructive volcanoes in history. It spit out between 500 and 700 cubic miles of debris. If you can even imagine what a cubic mile of debris looks like. This here dropped our population from somewhere, they're estimating in the millions, to less than 10,000. It's one of the single largest bottlenecks in human history, all caused by this volcano, which now looks like a peaceful little town.
Where is that?
That is Indonesia, and basically so much stuff was thrown in the air. There was a winter for 6 to 7 years. Followed by about 1,000 years of cooling on the earth. So that was by far the most destructive one that we know of. You have Mount Vesuvius, which is 79 AD. This was one of the first ones we ever had described. It's described by Pliny the Younger. Pliny the Elder went into the town to try and save people. He didn't survive. This gave us our first real good account of what a volcano does and gave us an idea of what to look for with the steaming and everything. Mount Vesuvius erupted so quickly, it released gas that was superheated to about 250 degrees centigrade that traveled out at about 500 miles an hour. It hit these people with ash that basically would have coated them inside and out in the seconds at 250 degrees. Basically instantly cooking everyone in the town. So we also, what does give us is this beautifully preserved city for us to go back and look at. And it's been studied by a lot of archaeologists because it is one of the best preserved Roman cities because it's been under a pile of ash for 1,000 years.
Are those concrete carved out statues?
Yeah,
No, those are people.
I was gonna ask that too. Are they real?
That's the ash that covered the people. Those are,
How they
yeah.
found them?
that's how they found them.
Did they just
Wow.
leave them there still?
They're preserving them now. They're putting them in, because now they're exposed to air, so it will start to crumble. So they're putting them behind glass and things like that. But no, and this was probably one of the nicest photos I could find of this. You see ones where people just taken back in terror. You see animals with them.
You see the mother holding a child.
Yeah, you see a mother holding a child. There's one of two people kissing. But basically it was an instantaneously, everybody just died. And unfortunately, that's the nature of volcanoes. They are very destructive. This was one of the first major eruptions that we had people around to see that was in recorded history. In fact, the description that Plinian gave us was so useful in volcanology. The type of eruption is actually called a Plinian eruption because he was so instrumental in giving us all the data that we needed to actually start the volcanology movement. Mount Tambora. This is one of the more recent. This is 1815. It ejected about 38 cubic miles of tephra. The explosion from this was heard 1,200 miles away. Killed about 71,000 people. And 1816 became known as the year without a summer because there was so much tephra in the sky that it blocked out the sun and the temperature never rose. It just stayed winter for an entire year. Crops failed, and they said 71,000 people was directly killed by this. They don't know how many people, how many famines and everything else were caused worldwide by this. But if you read history back in about 1816, in a lot of countries you'll see a lot of famines started, and they don't necessarily attribute it to Tambora, but that was more than likely the cause of it.
Where's that located?
This is, again, I think this is Philippines. I put some of the later ones, but I didn't put this one. Somalia or Indonesia, somewhere. Krakatoa, this is another one. This is in Somalia. This was one of the largest ones. 1883, completely destroyed the island it was on. There were people living on that island. This is a picture now. It's regrowing. Created a tsunami 140 feet tall. Killed about 34,000 people. And as you can see, and you see these numbers going up quite a bit, and you think, okay, well, those, the 1883, that was a long time ago. The geologic history of the Earth, that's not that long. This one I put in here because I thought it was kind of interesting. This is what's called a limnic eruption. This happened at Lake Nyos, which is in South America. Basically how this works is the volcano itself never actually erupted. It vents gas into the lake that's in the crater. The gas creates, if you mix carbon dioxide with water, you get carbonic acid. And eventually, if you put so much gas in the water, it will have to go somewhere. So it finally vented. It created a fountain of water over 300 feet tall. And all the gas came out of the water. Basically the lake turned itself upside down. All the gas that was accumulating at the bottom popped up, and the people in these villages don't know what hit them. Basically, a huge cloud of carbon dioxide came down the mountains and just suffocated everyone. The survivors were saying they didn't know what was happening. They just were sitting in town, and they started choking. They didn't know what caused it. 1,700 people died, about 3,500 livestock, which in this area is a lot of people. These whole villages completely wiped out. They had no idea why until scientists came in to look it up. Now they've added in structures to vent the gas. So if you go there now, you'll see these big fountains of water. That's them venting the gas so this doesn't happen again. But this wasn't that long. It was in 1986. They had no idea what would cause it. It took probably 5 years before they could figure out what to do or what caused it. And they just started venting this in 2005. So, just one I thought was interesting. This is the one you all probably know, Mount St. Helens. This was the first major eruption we had in the United States since the USGS has been founded, or at least since they had volcanology. It created the largest landslide in recorded history. Basically, the entire side of the top and side of the mountain went down the mountain. You had 200 destroyed homes, 185 miles of roads, 115 miles of roadway, $1.1 billion in damages, but only 57 deaths. This was the first mountain we knew was going to erupt, and we had scientists monitoring it. So the only people who died in this, with the exception of one poor scientist who happened to be on the wrong side of the mountain, were people that ignored the warnings, including Harry Truman. But they had told all these people, this mountain will erupt, you need to leave. And people would, well, what do you know? You know, I've lived here my whole life, I know this mountain, it's fine. Some scientist isn't gonna come in and tell me to leave. Well, they all died. The devastation was immense. Those are trees. It knocked them down like toothpicks up to 6 miles away from the shockwave.
With Mount St. Helens, 70 of the people that died were geologists that were on the volcano studying it.
What's that? Well, no, there were only 57 deaths.
Oh, I thought it was 7. No. Okay. Well, some portion of that.
Yeah,
or
that,
a
like I
big
said, there was,
portion of that.
no, it was actually a very small portion.
Were geologists?
Well, we're geologists.
Most of the people died in the landslide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And remember, there's been more than one eruption. I'm talking just the one in
First
1980.
eruption.
But yeah, from what I understand, there was only one geologist that died in that, and it was the person that was standing on the far side when it collapsed. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They had evacuated everybody out. Most of the people that died were just people who stayed behind.
That were being stupid.
Yeah. And like I said, these are trees. It had 6 miles out, you had trees blown away.
And those are big trees.
Yeah, those are big pine,
Like-
yeah,
These are Douglas firs.
Doug firs,
Yeah.
western hemlock, big.
yeah. Just knocked down like they're nothing. Tars just completely buried. The good news is, it's back. If you go out there today, it's beautiful. There have been eruptions since then, none to that scale. But life is returning. And life will always find a way to come back after these massive eruptions, which is kind of a beautiful thing, in my opinion. My clicker's dying. There we go. Okay, volcanoes in America. Anyone know how many of the volcanoes there are in America? I know we were discussing it earlier. Most people are going to say well, active volcanoes. You have any guess? Like 15, 20?
We got a bunch in the Cascades, you have some more up in Alaska. In Hawaii, there's only
2 active.
2 active, plus there's one off the coast that hasn't popped up yet.
Yeah. There's actually, well, they actually classify 19 in Hawaii. There's 2 main ones. But you have 169 active volcanoes in America.
Wow.
You know, you wouldn't think that it would be that many. I think over 100 of those are in Alaska.
Oh, wow.
That whole chain of islands is nothing but volcanoes.
It's Aleutians.
Does that include anything that's going on in the Yellowstone? area?
That's included in that.
Yeah, see the big batch of green there?
Yeah. But that's total, that's from the USGS. All the facts that I'm quoting come straight from the USGS. I just want to go over, these are some major ones you've heard of in America. Mount Kilauea, it's the largest continuing eruption in the United States. Actually, it's the longest continuing erupting volcano in the world at this point. It's been erupting for over 30 years. And in all that time, or well, I should say in all that time, from 1900 till present, it's killed 4 people. Basically, Mount Kilauea has what's called lava, which is very slow moving. So if you know where it's going to go, you just move out of the way. And actually, you can walk across it a few seconds after it's formed. I was talking with one of the professors who worked at the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. So they used to go out there and cook their lunch on it.
Oh, wow.
You take some frozen burritos and wait for the lava to go over and just fling them on there.
There's some
Let 'em
cookies
cook.
on there. for these snacks.
Yeah, it's perfectly hygienic because everything would have been killed by the heat. So they can throw hamburgers and stuff out there. They sit there and poke it with sticks and everything else.
When one volcano erupts, does that cause other eruptions, like an earthquake, reverberates across?
Not necessarily. It
they're
depends
not-
on the type of earthquake, type of volcano, but
Uh-huh.
typically not. Typically, if one erupts, you might have some vents of it that erupt, but that one won't cause another one because they're typically far enough away.
Okay.
And the one will release enough pressure that it doesn't keep going. The Hawaiian volcanoes, like I said earlier, are fed by a hot spot, so they will continue to, even if there's no movement on the plates, they will continue to erupt until they're out of magma. So the other one in Hawaii that's been, that the major one is Mauna Loa. It last erupted in 1984. Again, this one never killed anyone that we know of. Mount Kilauea, on the other hand, before 1900 was one of the deadliest volcanoes in the United States. It has killed more people than Mount St. Helens, more people than Mount Rainier, any of the ones in Alaska, just because they didn't know it was going to erupt at the time. When they first got to Hawaii, they didn't know what volcanoes were, so they built these big settlements, and then when it suddenly became active, it wiped out a ton of people. Mount Rainier, you don't think of this one so much as active. It has erupted a few times, but people don't think of it too much. This is actually on high alert. It's right next to Seattle. It's been active for over 500,000 years. It last erupted 2,200 years ago, but again, when you think of 500,000 versus 2,200, that 2,200 years is not that long. You'll hear people say it's overdue. You can't really say that with volcanoes. You hear that a lot. Volcanoes don't follow a specific pattern, with the exception of some very specific kinds, like Stromboli in Italy. These will basically erupt when it feels like erupting. We couldn't tell you what actually causes it. Well, we can tell you what the process, but we can't tell you what causes that process. But this one, the main reason we're worried, it's right next to Seattle. When this goes, it may be a small one or it may be a big one. When it does go, if it's a big one, Seattle's toast. But as of right now, we're worried about it. They said it looks active, more active in the last 10 years than it has been, but they're still not real worried about it. There's none in America right now that we're really worried about, besides what TV tells you.
How long before a volcano erupts do they know it's going to erupt?
They can.
I mean, I know they don't know it's going to erupt tomorrow, but
Right now they're saying they can tell usually a month or so before, and they've predicted them a couple of months before so they can get people out.
mhm.
They'll at least know a few days, but it's not, with the exception of a very rare occurrence. It's not going to be, oh no, it went off 10 minutes ago and we didn't know.
Yes.
We monitor these things, anything that's active, we monitor so closely. As soon as we start seeing growth in the magma chambers, we start evacuating people because they can be so catastrophic. Unfortunately, with some of those Plinian ones, the stratovolcanoes, they can be like champagne bottles. If something jars them close enough, they go. And the mechanism that happens in this is exactly like a cork bottle. What causes a volcano to erupt is water. You would never think it, but you have a lot of water dissolved in the magma. When that magma, the pressure gets low enough that the water can start forming bubbles, it will. Well, it can't form bubbles without crystals. So some very specific things happen. Crystals have to start to grow, which gives the water somewhere to grab, which causes the explosive, basically the explosion. So you have to have some very specific things happen. So you'll see them grow as the pressure drops for them to be able to grow those crystals. But once those crystals start forming, it's unavoidable. It's going to blow because the pressure just builds and builds and builds until finally it's enough pressure for the top to explode off. Long Valley Caldera, this is one of 3 supervolcanoes in the United States. This one is still active. This is where all these rocks come from. I did a lot of trips out here. We're doing some research with Dr. Malsavisi and for USF. He's doing a lot with the Bishop Tuff. But this last erupted about 50,000 years ago. It, like I said, is still active. There are hot springs still in this area. And hot springs to the point of, if you get in them, you'll be boiled alive, hot springs. Yeah. They're actually starting to use this for power, with hydrothermal power. It's one of the first hydrothermal plants in America. It's built over in Long Valley Caldera. It's 11 miles wide, so this is a very big volcano. Again, this is a super volcano. It ejected about 140 cubic miles of tephra when it exploded 50,000 years ago. There was a threat that they were starting to see growth in the 1970s and 80s, so they were actually concerned that this was going to go off again, and it just stopped. They don't know why. So they're continuing to monitor. Again, it's considered highly active. The second supervolcano in the United States is LaGuardia Caldera. This one is no longer active. This is one of the largest volcanoes in the world. It ejected about 1,200 cubic miles of tephra, which is one of the largest amounts ever ejected in one eruption. It's a beautiful area. If you ever get a chance to go out there, I really suggest it. It's out in Colorado. The caldera itself is 22 miles by 47 miles. So it's not a simple, oh, I'm going to go see a little crater. No, you can't tell it's there without aerial photos. Last erupted 28 million years ago. MA's million years ago. Again, no longer active. Here's the one everyone asks about, Yellowstone. I know you've all seen all the documentaries telling you this is going to explode tomorrow and kill us all. It is not going to. Well, I shouldn't say it's not going to. You have a 0.00014% chance that it will go off this year. Or 1 in 730,000. Basically, the people who are saying it's overdue to eruption have gone through and they looked and they said, okay, it's erupted 3 times. It's been about 600,000 in between each time. They don't work that way. The last eruption was actually 70,000 years ago. And just because this erupts doesn't mean it's going to be another super eruption. The last, I think, 70 eruptions of this have just been small amounts of magma. Small amounts of lava, that's it. A few lava flows and it's done. It is not going to kill us all. Everybody asks me every time they hear, oh, you study volcanoes, what's happening with Yellowstone? Is it going to kill us tomorrow? No. Okay. It is an absolute gorgeous area. If you've never been out to Yellowstone, make a trip out there. They have the whole area is active. There are geysers everywhere. You have these absolute beautiful formations. The colors, these don't do it any justice when you go out there. It's absolutely stunning. And you have Old Faithful, which is the one everyone knows, which is actually not even the most regular geyser they have. And what a geyser is just basically where you have rock and the water goes down in the rock, which is being heated by that magma chamber underneath. The pressure basically gets so high that it can't contain itself anymore and it'll spew out the water. Yeah. I was planning on this being a little bit longer, but I lost it all, so this is kind of the end of it. But I wanted to say, volcanoes are scary. They leave a lot of destruction. You'll get despair looking at what happens. All you'll see is the death. But life comes back. And again, it will always find a way and it will bounce back and thrive. This is, again, Toba. This was the most devastating to human population. It's beautiful. So don't think of these as scary. Think of them as just a new start. Any questions? So I was hoping to have that longer, but